The process server handed me the thick envelope at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, right as I was sipping my coffee and scrolling through Instagram. Inside were divorce papers and a temporary custody order that would change everything. But let me back up to where it all started. That damned Christmas party 3 months ago. The Technova office Christmas party was supposed to be fun. I'd spent 2 hours getting ready, picking out my red dress that hugged all the right curves, doing my makeup just so. At 34, I still turned heads, and I wasn't about to let suburban mom life make me invisible. Graham, my husband of 8 years, stood by the punch bowl, looking uncomfortable in his navy suit. He never liked office parties, preferring his computer screens to small talk. But as an IT project manager, he had to show up occasionally. "Isolde, you look stunning." Victor Kelman, my boss, appeared at my elbow with that charming smile that made half the women in accounting blush. At 41, Vic had that silver fox thing going, salt and pepper hair, expensive cologne, and the kind of confidence that came from corner offices and six-figure salaries. "Thank you, Vic. You clean up pretty well yourself." I touched his arm lightly, letting my fingers linger just a second longer than necessary. From across the room, I caught Graham watching us, his jaw tight. Good. Maybe a little jealousy would remind him what he had. The party was in full swing when Vic suggested taking photos by the Christmas tree. "Come on, team, let's get some shots for the company newsletter." Everyone gathered around, drinks in hand, laughing and posing. That's when Vic patted his knee and grinned at me. "Isolde, sit here, let's make this interesting." It was just a joke, a playful, harmless joke. I perched on his lap, one arm around his shoulders, both of us laughing as cameras flashed. His hand rested on my waist, thumb tracing small circles through the fabric of my dress. "Isolde," Graham's voice cut through the laughter like ice. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I looked up to find him standing there, face pale, wedding ring glinting under the Christmas lights. Around us, conversations had quieted. People were staring. "Oh, lighten up, Graham," I said, not moving from Vic's lap. "It's just a photo. Please get up." The please was what made it worse somehow. Not angry, not demanding, just quietly desperate. I felt heat creep up my neck, embarrassment mixing with defiance. "You're being ridiculous," I said, finally standing. "It's a Christmas party, not a funeral." That's when Graham did something that made everyone in that room stop talking. He pulled off his wedding ring, looked at it for a long moment, then slipped it into his pocket. The silence was deafening. "Graham," I started, but he was already walking away, heading for the exit. "Well," Vic said awkwardly, "maybe we should get some group shots instead." But the damage was done. I could feel every pair of eyes in that room, could practically hear the whispered conversations that would start the moment I left. My cheeks burned as I grabbed my purse and followed Graham out to the parking lot. He was sitting in our Honda Civic, engine running, staring straight ahead. "That was completely unnecessary," I said, sliding into the passenger seat. "You embarrassed me in front of my entire office." "I embarrassed you." He finally looked at me, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. "Isolde, you were sitting on another man's lap, at your office Christmas party, in front of everyone we know." "It was a joke." "Was it?" He put the car in drive. "Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were enjoying yourself a little too much." The drive home was silent except for the radio playing Christmas carols that now felt mocking. When we pulled into our driveway, I could see our 7-year-old daughter Mila's face pressed against her bedroom window, waiting for us to come home. "Don't you dare bring your jealousy into the house," I warned Graham as we walked up the front steps. "Mila doesn't need to see you acting like this." He stopped at the front door, key in his hand. "Acting like what, Isolde? Like a husband who's tired of watching his wife flirt with her boss?" "I wasn't flirting." "Then what would you call it?" I didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, I had an answer, but it wasn't one I was ready to admit to myself, let alone to him. The next morning, Graham was gone before I woke up. He'd made coffee and left a note saying he had an early meeting, but his wedding ring wasn't on the nightstand where he usually left it when he showered. Mila came downstairs in her pajamas, brown hair sticking up in all directions. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, climbing onto her chair at the kitchen table. "He had to go to work early, sweetheart." I poured her orange juice and started making scrambled eggs, trying to keep my voice light. "He'll be home for dinner." But when dinner time came, Graham texted that he was working late. Then it happened again the next night. And the next. By the weekend, even Mila noticed something was wrong. "Why doesn't Daddy talk to you anymore?" she asked Saturday morning, looking up from her coloring book. "He only talks to me." It was true. Graham had been civil but distant, speaking to me only when necessary, and never when Mila wasn't around. He slept on his side of the bed, got up early, came home late, and spent his evenings helping Mila with homework or reading to her. "Daddy's just tired from work," I told her, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. That afternoon, while Graham took Mila to the park, I called my sister Ruth. "He's being completely unreasonable," I complained, pacing around our living room. "It was one innocent photo, and he's acting like I cheated on him." "Men and their egos," Ruth said with a snort. She'd never liked Graham, thought he was too controlling, too serious. "He's probably just insecure because your boss is more successful than he is." "That's what I think too. But now he won't even wear his wedding ring, Ruth. People at work are starting to ask questions." "Let them ask. You didn't do anything wrong, Isolde. If Graham can't handle you having a little fun at a Christmas party, that's his problem." Her validation felt good, but it didn't solve the problem of living in a house that felt more like a polite boarding arrangement than a marriage. When Graham and Mila came home from the park, I tried to bridge the gap. "How was your afternoon?" I asked, attempting a smile. "Fine," Graham said, not looking at me. "Mila, go wash your hands for dinner." After she disappeared upstairs, I tried again. "Graham, can we please talk about this? It's been a week." He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then he said, "What's there to talk about, Isolde?" "The Christmas party. Your reaction. This cold shoulder you're giving me." My reaction. He finally looked at me, and I was startled by how tired he looked. "You mean my reaction to watching my wife sit on another man's lap and then tell me I was being ridiculous for not liking it?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" He pulled out a small notebook I'd never seen before, flipped it open. "Because I've been thinking about it. A lot. And I keep coming back to the same questions." My heart started beating faster. "What questions?" "Like why you've been staying late at work so much lately. Why you started putting a passcode on your phone. Why you bought new lingerie but I haven't seen you wear it." He looked down at the notebook. "Why you deleted all your text messages last Tuesday." The blood drained from my face. "You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention. There's a difference." "Graham, you're being paranoid." "Am I?" He closed the notebook, slipped it into his pocket. "Then you won't mind showing me your phone." The request hung in the air between us like a challenge. I could hear Mila upstairs, singing to herself as she washed her hands. Normal life continuing while ours fell apart. "I'm not showing you my phone," I said finally. "I'm not going to be treated like a criminal in my own house." Something shifted in his expression. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. And as I watched him walk away, I had the strangest feeling that I'd just failed some kind of test I didn't even know I was taking. The following Monday, I met Ruth at our usual coffee shop downtown. She was already there when I arrived, scrolling through her phone with a frown. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." I slumped into the chair across from her and signaled the waitress for coffee. "I'm serious, Isolde. You have bags under your eyes and you're wearing the same sweater you wore last week. What's Graham doing to you?" He's not doing anything. That's the problem. I accepted my coffee gratefully, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. He's treating me like a roommate. Polite, distant, completely shut off. Because of that stupid Christmas party. It's more than that now. He thinks I'm having an affair. Ruth's eyebrows shot up. Are you? The question caught me off guard. What? No, of course not. But you want to be. I opened my mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Ruth knew me too well. It's not about wanting an affair, I said carefully. It's about feeling appreciated. When was the last time Graham looked at me the way Vic does? Ruth leaned forward, her expression intense. Listen to me, Isolde. You're 34 years old. You're beautiful, smart, successful. You don't have to settle for a man who makes you feel invisible. I'm not settling. Aren't you? When's the last time you felt excited about anything? When's the last time your heart raced when someone walked into a room? I thought about Vic's smile, the way he said my name, how he always seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, how different that felt from Graham's distracted nods and one-word answers. You deserve to be happy, Ruth continued, and if Graham can't see what he has, maybe it's time to find someone who can. Back at the office that afternoon, I found myself looking for Vic more than usual. He was in meetings most of the day, but around 4 o'clock, he stopped by my desk. Hey there, stranger. You've been quiet since the Christmas party. Everything okay? I glanced around the office, making sure no one was listening. Graham's not handling things well. Ah. Vic perched on the edge of my desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Husband troubles? You could say that. He thinks we're having an affair. Vic's expression shifted slightly. Are we? The question hung between us, loaded with possibility. I felt my cheeks flush. I should get back to work, I said, not answering. He stood up, but before he walked away, he leaned down close to my ear. If you ever need someone to talk to, you know where to find me. That evening, Graham was late again. When he finally came home, he barely spoke during dinner, responding to Mila's chatter, but ignoring my attempts at conversation. After we put Mila to bed, I found him in his home office, typing on his laptop. We need to talk, I said from the doorway. I'm busy. Graham, please, this can't go on forever. He saved whatever he was working on and turned to face me. What do you want to talk about, Isolde? Us, our marriage, the fact that we're living like strangers. Whose fault is that? It's not about fault, isn't it? He stood up, and I noticed he was holding that notebook again. Because I've been doing some thinking, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion, which is that my wife is having an emotional affair with her boss, and she's trying to convince me I'm crazy for noticing. The accusation hit like a slap. That's not true. Then explain the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way you light up whenever Victor Coleman is around. His name is Vic, and he's my boss. Of course I'm professional with him. Professional? Graham laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call sitting on his lap? God, are you ever going to let that go? Are you ever going to admit what it really was? We stared at each other across the room, years of marriage and shared history, reduced to this moment of mutual accusation and denial. The doorbell rang. We both froze. It was almost 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Nobody visited at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Graham walked past me toward the front door, and I followed, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. Through the peephole, I could see a man in a suit holding a large envelope. Graham Fenwick? The man asked when Graham opened the door. Yes. I have some papers for your wife. Is Isolde Fenwick available? My legs went weak. Graham stepped aside, and the process server looked directly at me. Isolde Fenwick? I nodded, unable to speak. You've been served. The envelope was thick and official-looking. My hand shook as I took it, staring at the return address. Thornton and Associates, Family Law. The process server left, and Graham closed the door behind him. We stood in our foyer, the envelope between us like a bomb waiting to explode. "Open it," Graham said quietly. With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. The words swam before my eyes: petition for dissolution of marriage, temporary custody order, financial disclosure requirements. "You're divorcing me," I whispered. "Yes. But we haven't even tried counseling." "Isolde." His voice was gentle but firm. "We both know this marriage has been over for months. I'm just making it official." I looked up at him, this man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years, who'd held my hand during Mila's birth, who'd been my partner in building the life I was apparently about to lose. "What about Mila?" "She'll be fine, better than fine, actually, once she doesn't have to watch us pretend anymore." The papers slipped from my hands, scattering across the hardwood floor like fallen leaves. Somewhere upstairs, our daughter was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world was about to change forever. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was asking the question I wasn't ready to face. How had Graham managed to file divorce papers so quickly? How long had he been planning this? The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations and hushed phone conversations. I'd hired a lawyer, Patricia Mills, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in complex family situations. Her first advice was to document everything and avoid any appearance of impropriety. Too late for that, I thought, remembering the Christmas party photos that were probably still circulating on social media. Graham had moved into the guest bedroom and was maintaining his polite, distant demeanor. He helped Mila with homework, made her breakfast, and acted like everything was normal. Meanwhile, I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own house. On Friday afternoon, my mother-in-law, Eleanor, showed up unannounced. Eleanor Fenwick was 61 years old, silver-haired, and had never particularly liked me. She'd always thought Graham could do better, and she'd never been shy about expressing that opinion in subtle ways. "Hello, Isolde," she said when I opened the door. "I think we need to talk." I let her in, knowing I didn't have much choice. She settled herself in our living room like she owned the place, her sharp blue eyes taking in everything: the scattered legal papers I'd forgotten to put away, the empty wine glass from last night, the general disarray that had become my life. "I heard about the divorce papers," she said without preamble. "Graham told you." "Graham tells me everything. He always has." She folded her hands in her lap. "What I want to know is what you plan to do about it." "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to fight for your marriage, or are you going to let it end because you couldn't keep your hands off your boss?" The bluntness of it took my breath away. "Eleanor." "Don't Eleanor me. I've been married to Peter for 38 years. I know what a marriage looks like when one person stops trying." She leaned forward. "The question is, did you stop trying before or after you started your affair?" "I'm not having an affair." "Then what would you call it?" It was the same question Graham had asked, and I still didn't have a good answer. "Vic and I are friends," I said weakly. "Friends don't sit on each other's laps at Christmas parties, dear." Heat flooded my cheeks. That was just what? Just the moment my son realized his wife had checked out of their marriage? Eleanor's voice was calm, but her words cut like knives. "Do you have any idea what you've done to him? To Mila? Mila doesn't know anything about this. Mila knows her parents don't talk anymore. She knows her father sleeps in the guest room. She knows something's wrong, even if she doesn't understand what." Eleanor stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Children always know, Isolde. They just don't always say anything." After she left, I called Ruth, desperate for some support. "She's just trying to protect her precious son," Ruth said dismissively. "Don't let her get in your head." "But what if she's right? What if I have been having an affair, just not the physical kind?" "There's no such thing as an emotional affair," Ruth said firmly. "That's just something jealous spouses make up to control their partners. You're allowed to have friends, Isolde. You're allowed to feel appreciated." Her words should have been comforting, but they felt hollow somehow. That weekend, Graham suggested we take Mila out to dinner as a family. One last time before the divorce proceedings got messy. I agreed, hoping maybe we could find some middle ground, some way to end things civilly. We went to Ridgeview Grill, an upscale restaurant downtown that had always been one of our favorites. Mila was excited to be there, chattering about school and her friends while Graham and I maintained polite conversation. Everything was going reasonably well until Vic walked in. He was with his wife, a petite blonde I'd seen at company functions, and another couple I didn't recognize. When he spotted us across the restaurant, he smiled and waved. "Who's that?" Graham asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "That's Vic, my boss." Graham's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. A few minutes later, Vic approached our table. "Isolde, what a nice surprise." He flashed that charming smile, completely ignoring the tension radiating from Graham. "And you must be the famous husband I've heard so much about." Graham stood up slowly, extending his hand. "Graham Fenwick. Victor Kalman. I've heard great things about you." They shook hands, and I could see Graham's knuckles go white from the pressure. "Daddy, who's this?" Mila asked, looking between the two men with curious eyes. "This is Mommy's boss from work," Graham said evenly. "Oh, are you the one Mommy talks about all the time?" The silence that followed was deafening. Vic's smile faltered slightly, and Graham's expression went completely blank. "Well," Vic said after a moment, "I should get back to my table." "Nice meeting you, Graham. See you Monday, Isolde." After he left, the rest of dinner was agony. Graham barely spoke. Mila sensed the tension and became quiet, and I felt like everyone in the restaurant was staring at us. When we got home, Graham helped Mila get ready for bed while I cleaned up the kitchen. After she was asleep, he found me loading the dishwasher. "Mommy talks about him all the time," he said quietly. I didn't look up from the dishes. "Kids exaggerate." "Do they?" "Graham, please." "No, I think we're past please." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then set it on the counter in front of me. "I hired a private investigator." My blood turned to ice. On the phone screen was a photo of me and Vic having coffee at a cafe downtown. We were leaning close together, laughing about something. To an outside observer, it would definitely look like more than a business meeting. "There are more," Graham said. "Lunch dates, after-work drinks, text messages, lots of text messages." "You had me followed?" I had my suspicions confirmed. He picked up the phone, swiped to another photo. This one showed me leaving Vic's office late one evening, my hand on his arm, both of us smiling. "The investigator says you two have been meeting regularly for about 3 months, always when I thought you were working late." I sank into a chair, the weight of my deception finally hitting me. "Graham, don't." He held up a hand. "Just don't. I don't want to hear any more lies." "They weren't lies exactly. What would you call them?" I didn't have an answer for that either. The next morning, I woke up to find Graham's side of the bed empty and cold. He'd left early again, but this time he'd left something behind, a manila folder on my nightstand with my name written on it in his careful handwriting. Inside were copies of everything, phone records showing dozens of calls and texts between me and Vic, credit card statements highlighting charges at restaurants where I'd claimed to be working late, screenshots of my work calendar showing discrepancies between where I said I'd be and where I actually was. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper, a timeline, meticulously documented, showing the progression of my relationship with Vic over the past 4 months. Coffee meetings that became lunch dates, work discussions that became personal conversations, professional boundaries that had slowly, steadily dissolved. Seeing it all laid out like that, in black and white, made me feel sick. I called in sick to work and spent the day pacing around the house, trying to figure out how to explain everything to Graham. By the time he came home that evening, I'd rehearsed a dozen different speeches, but none of them seemed adequate. He was quiet during dinner, answering Mila's questions but avoiding eye contact with me. After we put her to bed, I followed him to his home office. "We need to talk about those papers you left me," I said. He didn't look up from his computer. "What's to talk about?" "Graham, I know how this looks." "How does it look, Isolde?" I took a deep breath. "Like I was having an affair." "Were you?" "Not physically." "That's not what I asked." The question hung in the air between us. I thought about all those lunches with Vic, the way my heart raced when he texted me, how I'd started dressing more carefully on days when I knew I'd see him. "I don't know," I said finally. "Maybe." Graham finally looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. "At least you're being honest now," he said quietly. "I never meant for it to happen. It just evolved." "Into what?" "Into feeling appreciated, into feeling attractive and interesting and valued." The words came out in a rush. "When was the last time you looked at me the way Vic does? When was the last time you made me feel like I was more than just a wife and mother? So this is my fault." "That's not what I'm saying." "It sounds like that's exactly what you're saying." Graham closed his laptop and turned to face me fully. "You're saying that because I didn't make you feel appreciated enough, you decided to find someone who would." "I didn't decide anything. It just happened." "Things don't just happen, Isolde. You make choices. You chose to have coffee with him. You chose to text him. You chose to delete those messages so I wouldn't see them." His voice was getting louder, and I was afraid Mila might hear us. "You chose to lie to me for months. I was protecting you." "From what? The truth? How is lying to me protecting me?" I didn't have an answer for that. "Do you love him?" Graham asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "What?" "It's a simple question. Do you love Victor Coleman?" I thought about Vic's smile, his attention, the way he made me feel when we were together. But love, I wasn't sure I knew what that meant anymore. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Do you love me?" That should have been an easy question. Graham was my husband, the father of my child, my partner for 8 years. But looking at him now, seeing the hurt and disappointment in his eyes, I realized I wasn't sure about that either. "I don't know that either," I whispered. Graham nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Then we don't have anything else to talk about," he said. The next few days were a nightmare. Graham was cordial but distant, treating me like a polite stranger. Mila kept asking why everyone was so quiet, why Daddy looked sad all the time, why Mommy was crying. I tried to reach out to Vic at work, but he was suddenly unavailable. His secretary said he was in meetings, or on calls, or out of the office entirely. When I finally cornered him in the parking garage on Thursday afternoon, his response wasn't what I expected. "Isolde, we need to be careful," he said, looking around nervously. "Your husband called me." My heart stopped. "He what?" "He called my office yesterday, said he wanted to discuss our professional relationship." Vic's fingers made air quotes, and I could see the worry in his eyes. "My wife was there when he called." "Oh, God. Look, I like you, I really do, but I can't afford to have my marriage blow up over this. You understand, right?" I stared at him, this man I'd risked everything for, and realized he was already backing away from me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should cool things down for a while, let everything settle." "Vic." "I'm sorry, Isolde, I really am." He walked away, leaving me standing alone in the parking garage, finally understanding what Graham had meant about choices and consequences. That night, I found Graham in the kitchen, sitting at the table with his laptop and a stack of papers. Legal documents, financial statements, custody agreements. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "Since the Christmas party," he said without looking up. "I hired the lawyer the next Monday." "You were that sure?" "I was that sure you'd lie about it." He finally looked at me. And I was right. I sat down across from him, looking at this man who'd been systematically documenting the end of our marriage while I'd been living in denial. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we get divorced. We figure out custody. We try to minimize the damage to Mila. He closed the laptop, and we both try to move on with our lives. Graham, there's something else, he said, cutting me off. Victor Kelman has agreed to provide a written statement about your relationship for the custody hearing. The room started spinning. He what? Apparently, when faced with the choice between protecting you and protecting his own marriage, he chose his marriage. Graham's voice was matter of fact, but I could hear the underlying anger. Can't say I blame him. What kind of statement? The kind that documents inappropriate workplace relationships and questions of professional judgment. He stood up, gathering his papers. The kind that makes it very clear who is responsible for destroying this marriage. As he walked past me toward the stairs, I grabbed his arm. Graham, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back at my face. Isolde, he said gently, you can't fix something you won't admit is broken. He pulled away and headed upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen, with the wreckage of my choices spread out around me like shattered glass. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late March. I'd spent weeks preparing with my lawyer, Patricia Mills, going over every detail of my relationship with Mila, my work schedule, my fitness as a mother. The key is to focus on your parenting, Patricia had advised. Don't get drawn into discussions about your marriage or your relationship with your boss. Keep everything centered on what's best for Mila. But as we walked into the conference room at Thornton and Associates, I could see that Graham's legal team had come prepared for war. His lawyer, David Thornton, was a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from winning a lot of cases. He had 3 thick binders in front of him, each one labeled with my name. Graham sat beside him, wearing his best suit, looking calm and composed. He'd lost weight over the past few months, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, but he carried himself with a dignity that made me ashamed of my own desperation. Before we begin, Thornton said, I'd like to present some evidence that speaks to the question of Mrs. Fenwick's judgment and character. Patricia started to object, but the mediator, a stern woman named Judge Crawford, waved her quiet. I'll hear it, she said. Thornton opened the first binder. These are phone records documenting over 200 calls and text messages between Mrs. Fenwick and her supervisor, Victor Kelman, over a 4-month period. The frequency and timing of these communications suggest a relationship that goes well beyond professional necessity. He slid copies across the table to Patricia and me. Seeing all those calls and texts laid out in black and white made my stomach churn. Furthermore, Thornton continued, opening the second binder, we have credit card records showing numerous lunches and dinners charged to Mrs. Fenwick's personal account at times when she told her husband she was working late. More papers slid across the table. Restaurant receipts, hotel bar charges, even a charge from Victoria's Secret that I'd forgotten about. Finally, Thornton said, opening the third binder, we have a written statement from Mr. Victor Coleman himself, detailing the nature of his relationship with Mrs. Fenwick. Patricia leaned over to whisper in my ear, Did you know about this statement? I shook my head, my mouth too dry to speak. Thornton began reading from the document. Over the past several months, Mrs. Isolde Fenwick and I developed what I now recognize was an inappropriate personal relationship. While we never engaged in physical intimacy, our interactions went well beyond normal professional boundaries. Mrs. Fenwick frequently sought personal advice and emotional support from me, often sharing intimate details about her marriage and expressing dissatisfaction with her husband. I felt like I was going to be sick. Every word was true, but hearing it read aloud in that sterile conference room made it sound sordid and calculating. I deeply regret allowing this relationship to develop, Thornton continued reading. It showed poor judgment on both our parts and has caused significant harm to Mrs. Fenwick's family. I take full responsibility for my role in this situation and am committed to ensuring it does not happen again. Judge Crawford looked up from the documents. Mrs. Fenwick, do you dispute the accuracy of these records? I looked at Patricia, who gave me a slight nod. No, Your Honor, I said quietly. The records are accurate. And do you dispute Mr. Cullman's characterization of your relationship? This was my chance to explain, to provide context, to make them understand that it wasn't as calculated as it looked. But as I sat there, looking at Graham's calm, dignified expression and thinking about Mila sleeping peacefully upstairs while I'd been texting another man, I realized there was no context that would make this okay. No, Your Honor, I said, I don't dispute it. Judge Crawford made some notes, then looked back at me. Mrs. Fenwick, in your own words, can you explain how this situation developed? I took a shaky breath. I felt unappreciated in my marriage. Vic, Mr. Coleman, made me feel valued and interesting. It started innocently, but over time, it became something more. I know it was wrong. I know I made terrible choices, but I love my daughter, and I'm a good mother to her. Being a good mother involves more than just loving your child, Judge Crawford said. It involves making decisions that prioritize her well-being over your own desires. Can you explain how carrying on an emotional affair with your married supervisor while lying to your husband prioritized your daughter's well-being? I couldn't. There was no explanation that would make sense, no justification that would hold up under scrutiny. It didn't, I said finally. I was selfish. I was thinking about what I wanted, not what was best for Mila. Judge Crawford nodded and made more notes. Then she looked at Graham. Mr. Fenwick, what custody arrangement are you seeking? Graham spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room. I want primary custody, Your Honor. I want Mila to have a stable home environment with consistent rules and expectations. I'm willing to allow supervised visitation with her mother until Mrs. Fenwick can demonstrate that she's addressed the issues that led to this situation. Supervised visitation? I gasped. Graham, you can't... Mrs. Fenwick, Judge Crawford said sharply, you'll have your turn to speak. But I could see in her expression that the decision had already been made. The evidence was overwhelming, my admissions were damning, and Graham had presented himself as the stable, responsible parent, while I'd been exposed as the one who'd prioritized her own emotional needs over her family's well-being. 20 minutes later, it was over. Graham was awarded primary custody of Mila, with me getting supervised visitation every other weekend. The house would be sold, with proceeds split between us after Graham's legal fees were paid. I would receive minimal alimony for 2 years, with the expectation that I would become self-supporting. As we gathered our papers and prepared to leave, Graham approached me. This isn't about revenge, Isolde, he said quietly. This is about protecting Mila. I know, I said, and for the first time in months I meant it. Outside the building, Patricia tried to be encouraging. We can appeal some of these decisions, she said. The supervised visitation is probably temporary. But I wasn't listening. Across the street, I could see Graham getting into his car, probably heading home to our daughter, his daughter now, to help her with homework and make her dinner and read her bedtime stories. All the things I'd taken for granted while I was busy feeling unappreciated and seeking validation from a man who'd abandoned me the moment things got complicated. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. How did it go? I looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Ruth's validation and encouragement had been part of the problem, reinforcing my self-pity and justifying my poor choices instead of challenging me to be better. As I walked to my car, I thought about the Christmas party that had started all of this. That moment when I'd sat on Vic's lap, laughing and flirting while my husband watched. I'd told myself it was just a joke, just harmless fun. But Graham had been right. It wasn't a joke. It was a choice. The first in a long series of choices that had led me here, to a parking lot outside a law office, having just lost custody of my daughter, because I'd convinced myself that my feelings mattered more than my family. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, seeing Mila every other weekend, under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. Graham had been gracious about the whole thing, never speaking badly about me to Mila, always encouraging their daughter to love and respect me despite everything that had happened. Vic had transferred to another branch of the company shortly after the custody hearing. His marriage had survived, barely, and he'd made it clear that he wanted nothing more to do with me. I'd learned through office gossip that he and his wife were in counseling, working to rebuild what I'd helped them damage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd destroyed my marriage chasing the fantasy of being with a man who'd ultimately chosen to fight for his own marriage instead. On a cold December evening, almost exactly 1 year after the Christmas party that had changed everything, I was picking up Mila after one of our supervised visits when Graham asked if we could talk privately. "I have something for you," he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside were official documents, a modification to our custody agreement. Graham was petitioning the court to end the supervised visitation requirement and allow me to have Mila overnight on weekends. "Why?" I asked, looking up at him in surprise. "Because you're her mother," he said simply, "and because over the past year, you've shown that you understand what you did wrong and you're committed to doing better." It was true. I'd been in therapy, working to understand how I'd rationalized my way into an affair and lied to myself about what I was doing. I'd learned to take responsibility for my choices instead of blaming Graham's lack of attention or Vic's manipulation. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. As I drove home to my empty apartment, I thought about second chances and the long, difficult work of earning back trust that had been shattered by selfishness and poor judgment. Graham had given me the greatest gift possible, the chance to be a real mother to Mila again. Not because I deserved it, but because he was the kind of man who could put his daughter's needs ahead of his own hurt and anger. The kind of man I'd been too blind to appreciate until it was too late.